And a very warm welcome to everybody. Good evening. I've muted you all, so anybody who wishes to talk is going to have to unmute themselves, but that's fine. It's a great pleasure to see friends old and new. And our screen is rapidly filling up. Well, let us get cracking. I'm delighted to see new faces with us today. Yusuf Allison from Atlanta, Georgia, welcome. And Paul Stead, where Paul is here, I swear I saw him coming, there he is. And we got more people, I'm sure, going to be joining. In fact, they're running into the room as we speak. And I'd very much like to welcome Sir Vince Cable and Jürgen Meyer. It's great to have you along. I really do appreciate it. And it's I think, a real privilege for us all to be able to get your views on where we are, where we're going, if we're going anywhere, the state of the economy, the state of the sector. It's all fascinating stuff. You may or may not have known, all of you, that I did actually have a chance to chat with Vince Cable yesterday evening, and that video was made live earlier today. And we discussed inevitably the budget. And I think, apart from one highlight, Vince, I think pretty much I could say that your reception to the budget was quite lukewarm, which was pretty much across the piece, I think, from all the expert opinion we've been getting. The exception was, of course, the 130% super deduction in year one of capital investment, which I think and hope will have some degree of encouragement for anybody looking to invest. Jürgen, great pleasure to see you. And I know that you've been doing the rounds of the TV studios in all inevitability today. Your permanent friend, is it Ian King on Sky?
No, I actually wasn't on Ian King today. I'm back on there on Monday morning.
Yeah. Okay. Well, anyway, listen, this is an opportunity. I don't want to be sort of sit here interviewing Vince and Jürgen. This is an opportunity, as always, for us to communicate. I want you to ask the questions of them, and I want them to ask questions of you, because I think it's really important for the sake of anybody involved in this sector that we keep the channels of communication wide open so that everybody knows what's going on. Also like to say hello to Stephen Barr, who I haven't seen for a while. Stephen, very good to see you. And it's a great pleasure to have you back, as always. So I'll kick off, but I would, as I say, encourage everybody to ask their own questions. And sorry, I'm just letting people in. I really can't chew gum and walk at the same time. I have to stop talking while I admit people into the room. So Vince, if I could start with you, just essentially, the day after the budget, the paper that you released, you wrote the foreword for from the Institute for Prosperity, because we had John Mills from there. He joined us a few weeks ago now. I appreciate your thoughts on whether you believe the budget is going to have any kind of impact on the stated intent of the IFP to help make manufacturing the center, focal point of the economy in future. Do you think the budget will have any effect on that whatsoever?
Not much. No, I think the improved investment allowance arrangement is the enhanced payment is very attractive for capital intensive industries, but I don't think the word manufacturing crossed the Chancellor's lips, actually. I mean, there was very little generally about long-term economic structure, how you get back to the kind of thinking we had with industrial strategy. No, complete absence of that kind of thinking. But to be fair to the Chancellor, that wasn't his job. I mean, his primary function is really to keep the economy alive in a condition where it's been put into very deep hibernation and a lot of damage has been done. And most of the interest centers on the service sector, in particular hospitality. I mean, they're the ones that's been really hit, and actually manufacturing has largely kept going through the pandemic. So it wasn't his focus, and understandably so. But if they're interested in long-term productivity growth, which is what we should be, then how you get back to thinking long-term about reviving manufacturing industry and associated activities should be what government's thinking about. When I published a pamphlet a couple of months ago on industrial strategy, and there's quite a lot of sort of cross-party consensus around it, but very little interest in government. And although Mr. Dominic Cummings wasn't my sort of favorite human being, I mean, he at least was thinking about these things, and I think his departure means that virtually nobody is, and we're sort of going back to rather old-fashioned treasury thinking and balancing the books, and that's pretty much where government ends.
Jürgen, would you agree with Vince's assessment there?
Yes, I do. I mean, maybe I just balance it slightly and say, look, if we reflect back over our journey over the last decade, we have as a sector made huge progress, and I want to say personally a huge thanks to Vince Cable for that, because Vince, I think, was our first business secretary who really embraced industrial strategy in the way that I saw fit for the nation, and actually Vince invited me to join the Bays board at the time to help on that journey, and I do think that as a nation we have pushed the importance of manufacturing quite successfully over that period a lot more, and I can also confirm that the initiative that I still lead in partnership with government, Made Smarter, that hopefully many of you are aware of, which is sort of a support program to help stimulate advanced digital technologies, is getting support from government. And I've been able to have 2 meetings with Kwasi Kwarteng on it already. He's actually speaking at the opening of the Made Smarter conference we're holding next week on the 10th of March. So there is some positive movement. However, what then happens is when you go into moments which are very significant, like the budget that just happened, then manufacturing is not on the forefront of the minds of the Chancellor, or indeed even of a business secretary, which on one hand just shows how hard we have to work to really influence policymakers, and that's a call on all of us. And I sometimes don't think we are strong enough in fighting for the importance of our sector. It's of course also a reflection of the fact that quite frankly, these people especially in the Treasury often just don't understand our sector. So when you looked at the budget, it was a huge disappointment. And I must even the super deduction allowance, which is a good thing overall. I mean, I would have targeted that much more. Why give a super deduction allowance to an Amazon warehouse that was going to be built anyway, to be able to deduct that investment from tax, when you could be targeting that at green manufacturing initiatives to improve energy efficiency in factories. And the other policy which I really worry about is the policy of free ports. Every bit of research you've read on it says that there's a big displacement factor that happens in free ports. And, we're now going to get every city and town in the country suddenly saying they are near a piece of water and want to be a port because they're scared of activities going to Liverpool, Humber and elsewhere. But the second thing is the sort of manufacturing that we're trying to push more of in the UK is high innovation, is high technology, is high productivity. That's the manufacturing we want. And if that's the manufacturing we want, you don't need to put them into tax havens, because that sort of manufacturing, should be able to pay its fair taxes and actually feel proud of doing so. So yes, I think the budget missed the mark for us as a sector hugely, and just shows how much we have to keep fighting for the importance of who we are.
One of the comments that Vince made to me in the course of the interview, in which I put up on LinkedIn, was about the lack of consistency in our political sector, where things chop and change, and initiatives often are only as good as the length of the parliament in which they were formed. I'd like to ask Stephen for his comment on that, because Stephen was managing director of the Manufacturing Advisory Service, and you fell victim to this in 2015, Stephen.
How kind of you to remind me. Yes, memories fade slowly, don't they? Actually, I was reminded when you said so Vince and Jürgen would be on this call tonight. So Vince and I shared a platform years and years ago in Maz days. So Vince, I don't expect you to remember this at all. And it's not intended to big me up in any way, because I was on the wrong end of your views. We got a googly question from the audience about private sector companies, and I was with a private sector company at the time delivering public sector services. And your point of view was we should be very flexible in steering public sector services to what companies really need. And my point of view kind of had to be that we had to follow the contract. So since Maz days, I think we've seen a lot more flexibility, but maybe this question is as much for Jürgen as yourself, about whether you guys now see a good balance of public and private sector investment coming together, or are you still disappointed in what government is delivering? We sent a little tidbit of news about Made Smarter last week. I just wonder how you feel public-private investment in manufacturing is going.
Well, if I can respond first, I mean, I thought the very good model that we had going was in the aerospace and the car industries, where you had 50-50 match funding for equity and got long-term projects going that wouldn't otherwise have happened. And there's been quite a lot of that since in the life sciences sector. Some of the new kind of quote green activities fall into that category, and the government has introduced this new fund, which at first sight seems a replica of the regional growth fund that was also based on that principle of government money coming alongside and matching private equity and particularly in industry. And if that kind of model can be rolled out on a larger scale, I'm all for it. And in terms of the balance of the economy, I mean, it was pointed out to me yesterday, I was on some very libertarian think tank who were sort of deploring the big increase in the role of the state in the economy. But actually, I think it is inevitable given the decade of crisis we've been through. And I think probably the balance of public and private is reasonably comfortable.
Yeah, I mean, again, I do think from when I started the journey of talking about more public sector investment to support our manufacturing industries to where we've got to, I think there is a sea change. Particularly with the Conservative government. My early discussions with the Conservative government were you've heard them all 1,000 times. It's all that we don't pick winners and we don't invest and all that sort of thing. And the good news is we have to a large extent move past some of those arguments. I mean, COVID, of course, has completely changed that landscape anyway, because there is a huge amount of public money going into the economy by definition. So we have moved a long way, specifically on Made Smarter. There is, to be very precise about it, it's now 173 million of government money that is in. It's a fraction of what a program like Made Smarter needs. We always said it needed to be about 1 billion. If you're really going to put it on steroids and really support a fourth industrial revolution, but that is good money. It's matched by industry to give us at least 400 million. So there's a more than a one-on-one match by industry going into Made Smarter, particularly some of the innovation programs. So that's all good. However, every pound we get is incredibly hard fought over, and the fights with the Treasury particularly are quite hard to release that money. And there is, for whatever reason, there is some inbuilt skepticism about manufacturing, about deep tech, and about what we do. And then you get the budget and you suddenly see an announcement for Help to Grow, which you've probably seen, where 520 million has been put up for technology adoption for service sector companies. This is a scheme which is going to be voucher based, I'm told. So it's going to be, you can apply for £5,000 vouchers for 3 predefined technologies such as CRM systems and sort of web hosting and this sort of thing. So really, what I would call commercial light tech, 520 million. Yet, Made Smarter, we've asked for a considerable scaling up, and it hasn't had anywhere near as much of that. And the reason is very simple, is that, by the way, I think the voucher program is probably not going to work very well, because even for light tech, it's not very easy to do that. The sort of the deep tech, the Made Smarter program, you can't just give people a voucher. You've got to give some advice, some support, probably a bit of training, support with some system integration, and all of this stuff suddenly gets a little bit too complicated. And what government want is just a simple sort of, let's get this out to the service sector scheme. So it is a struggle.
I'd just like to, if I may, Angela, before we come to that, I'd just like to just change tack very quickly and just want to mention that Alison Giddens has joined us for the very first time from Wintech, a technology firm just outside Atlanta, Georgia, because you're coming in here for the first time and witnessing a debate about the internal politics of the industrial sector and the UK government. So I'll ask you a question, if I may, just about, we're talking about the involvement of government in manufacturing. Is the sense that you have in the United States of whether the US government, which everybody thinks is sort of hands off, is the US government at all involved at any scale in companies like your own? Do you get any support?
So I think that first off, thank you so much for inviting me. I have been connected to Ram for a while, and then I was introduced to UNIC. So I'm excited to be around you all and hopefully glean some great knowledge for what's happening with my friends over there. So yes and no. I think you're absolutely correct in that the government in the US typically has a pretty interesting reputation of being hands off to private companies. I see, though, that there are different little tentacles that are weaving their way into bits and pieces, for sure. If you're familiar at all with an initiative going on in manufacturing in the US, CMMC, Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification, there's a lot of talk about, how do we protect ourselves from the bad guys, right? So in manufacturing, everything from IT to OT, and the levels of government involvement on that level, you can start seeing some justification for different cost increases, different taxes or on either side. You can see questions about having allowances, so to speak, from a small business manufacturer perspective back to the government. But then you also have the argument from the government side, okay, well, justify to us why we shouldn't create some sort of major IT brain that ultimately can read all of your systems, public and private. So there is a lot of discussion going on with those, and I see the more those little things will ultimately justify the bigger picture of government involvement and support.
Well, thank you for that, Alison. I'm so pleased you're here with us today, and I'm hoping you're going to come back next week, because I really want to talk to you about a program that you and Ram were talking about, the virtual internships, which is a wonderful way of actually getting young people who've been separated from access to technical education and indeed just the very essence of manufacturing. You found a very good way, good program to do that. So please come back next week and describe that to us in more detail. Angela, that will be music to your ears as well when Alison comes back next week, because I know how interested you are in that subject. But you raised your hand. You wanted to ask a question of Vince or Jürgen.
Yes, it was for Jürgen, really. We've had conversations over the last few months about manufacturing, and one of the things that seems to crop up time and time again is the fact that manufacturers don't tend to raise their head above the parapet. They sort of stay in their factories, they do what they have to do, and they go home at the end of the day. And we've had conversations about how we make it more attractive to our younger generation, and even how do we make manufacturing sexy, And I wonder whether the government's lack of interest is because we don't get out there and parade how good we are and what a brilliant manufacturing industry we've got.
Well, I totally agree, which is, I have spent a lot of time encouraging more manufacturers to join the movement, and then I guess it's why I'm here talking to all of you as well this evening. And I do think the time is absolutely right now. We all need to, really, really champion and speak out for the great work we do and get the attention. Because what I've just described on that sort of 520 million program, and it not really being focused on manufacturing. I mean, I've just clarified what I meant by that in the chat, but certainly not clarified on deep tech. I think we have to shout out, and we have been the soldiers of the economy. We are the high productivity engine. We are the exporters, and actually is also the sector most affected by Brexit, which is a real issue in terms of keeping our supply chains going. So yes, I so agree with you. In terms of the sexy, I don't think that is a problem at all. All manufacturing companies, do such great things. And I find that whenever you get to actually talk in public about what any of our companies do, it's amazing how much inspiration that releases, and people do find it interesting. And the other thing that I would just add is the way to make anything super exciting is to add digital tech into it. The minute you start to talk about whatever you're manufacturing, but you're doing it with robotics and machine learning. But I tell you what, just call machine learning artificial intelligence, because it sounds a bit sexier. The minute you throw all of the augmented reality, virtual reality, I mean, everybody wants to play with that. It's brilliant. And the minute you throw more of that sort of technology in, people lap it up, and young people lap it up, and I find they want to come and work in our industry. So I think we've got a lot to shout about.
Paul, you raised your hand. Good evening to you. You're on mute. There we go. Sorry.
Yeah. I'm coming at it from a slightly different perspective, and it's more of a comment rather than a question, because after the Second World War, and we're probably in quite a similar state where the economy at the moment is quite in the doldrums, Churchill actually founded a thing called the Design Council, and which really championed design as a way of creating value and creating products that people want to buy. So for me, just throwing technology at the sake of a product for making it sexy is not necessarily the way. Design, and I'm clearly a designer by training, but I couldn't really work a lot in the UK because a lot of my skills weren't valued. And the role of brand and the creating of desire and products that people want to buy. So most of my work has actually been done in the States with Motorola, with the big tech companies over there, creating products that people want to buy. So I would urge the UK to actually look at design as a way of adding value and differentiation to products and to brand and to creating the desire that in products that people actually want to buy and want to use. And I just say that is a digital, that can be a whole aspect of creating of brand, but it's something that we are in the UK are very, very good at. But yet most of that in my lifetime has been spent overseas. And I guess the other thing that's a comment on that is when I teach in a number of the universities, the majority of the students in those universities are coming here from China, from the Far East, from America, from around the world to learn our skills. Yet we are desperately bad at putting that to work for ourselves. So that's my plea in a way. Please use design as a valuable business differentiating tool.
Yeah, I mean, very, very quick answer from me, and then I'll leave Vince to talk about the war. I'm not very good at wars, given my background. But on the specifically design, look, I totally agree with you. And actually, there is quite a strong group lobbying for a sort of a design smarter program, because I totally agree with you. It's a huge differentiator. Britain's damn good at it. Having said that, where I slightly have a different view is actually I think you can throw an awful lot of tech at design because an awful lot of design these days, is done in virtual environments, and and obviously that then takes you into digital twinning and twinning the product and the manufacturing process and all of that. So I think you can super sort of make it interesting in terms of tech from the design side. But I totally agree with you, Paul.
Well, the most valuable company in the world, Apple, I mean, Sir Jonathan Ive, is legendary, and we really need that at the moment more than ever in this country.
I want to raise the point again that Vince and I were talking about yesterday, and it goes to partly what Jürgen was saying and what Angela was saying about raising our voices. And I suggested that manufacturers, businesses generally, I think, in this country, have grown to believe that government is the answer for everything. And if they don't get what they want, well, we just go back to the drawing board or try again. Vince went on to say that the lobby group's actually been very effective. Make UK, formerly EEF, he was very complimentary about. But Vince, I'd like you to pick up on the point you said to me, which is about whether more lobby groups from different disciplines should get together and to raise their voice and sort of amplify this message.
Yeah, so in a way it follows on from the discussion we've just had. I mean, there is quite a lot of synergy between getting different groups working together. I mean, I think the point that Paul made about design is absolutely essential, because there is a very big creative art lobby in the UK. I mean, the designers, the creative arts schools are very influential. And I think it's the Royal College, where in the entrance of design, they have Hockney, the artist, and Dyson, the inventor, side by side. And certainly, when I went to some of our best companies like Jaguar Land Rover, the bit of the company that for them was the most valuable and also the most secretive was their design department. So, if you can get the creative industries and the manufacturing industries working together, you have much more of an impact on government. But in terms of just going back slightly on points that were made earlier about how you get manufacturing to be sexy. I mean, I can say this now because I've retired from politics, but politicians are terrible slaves of fashion. And currently, the sexy thing is to have the word green attached to it. And if you're doing anything that can be vaguely described as green, politicians, national and local, are going to grab you. I mean, one of the reasons why Jürgen was such valuable property was that his company was making turbines, which they started making on Humberside, and that really ticked more boxes than manufacturing. And of course, the other big political gimmick of the moment is the levelling up stuff. And if you're doing things in the West Midlands or Yorkshire or Teesside, there will be some, local politicians who will sort of grab you and really, advertise what you're doing. So, I mean, there's a certain amount of cynicism in what I'm saying, but if you're trying to get the political agenda, there are certain themes running through it, which the kind of regional balance and environmentalism are currently the top two themes. And that big complex that's now developing in Redcar, the big battery development. I mean, that's exactly the kind of things which, government love to see and will get behind with money and in other ways.
Just to let Jürgen and Vince know, one of the topics we've been talking about over the weeks has been ambassadors, just for want of a neat phrase, which is really about encouraging groups of manufacturers in local communities, and there are already very many of them. Roy Howarth will tell you that there's a very good group in the Solent. Sam Bainham will tell you there's a very good group in the Plymouth area, and they're everywhere. But it is really about trying to get communities of manufacturers to be better at getting hold of their local politicians, be it at district council level or their MPs, and really just doing some local lobbying and raising the profile. And I'm sure that will have a big impact. And we've all got day jobs, but we're going to try and put some flesh on that particular bone and see if we can't do something with it. Ram, you had your hand up. Would you like to join the conversation on that?
Oh, thanks, Nick. Finally noticing me. Hello, everybody. Hi.
Hey.
So yeah, three really quick points. 4 if I can talk about cricket, but 3 really quick points. Yeah. Okay. 3 quick points in that case. First of all, I completely agree with what Paul said earlier. Design has to be at the core of everything we do. And Jürgen, I don't know if you remember this chat you and I had when we did the Thai event when you were interviewed by Vikas, and I asked you exactly the same thing. Why don't we have a design smarter program at the back end of the talk that you did? Secondly, we are all mistaking the industry for revolution to be, you have to be a technology early adapter, you have to be a technology champion, you have to have the fancy pieces of AR, VR, and the matrix and all those things. But actually, it is more about how do we enable companies to get to the next level of technological advancement than where they are right now, rather than throwing all the available tech at their face and say, there you go, you can have all of it. And yeah, so that's 2 things, isn't it? So, and the final thing I wanted to talk about is we need to redefine manufacturing. It is no longer about simply putting things together or grinding material away or anything. It is the entire life cycle of a product. We talk about PaaS, we talk about SaaS. I don't know, not SaaS as in SaaS, but software as a service. We talk about pretty much everything as a service. So manufacturing has to be redefined, and everybody needs to be told it's not just about putting things together anymore. It's the entire life cycle of the product, right from concept to the point of not even decommissioning, recommissioning, because we're talking circular economy, the green thing that Vince mentioned earlier. So we need to do all of that. 3 things, 3 quick points, and I'm done. And we won't talk about the cricket. So yeah.
With 4 more days to go, hopefully. Ewan, would you like to join in?
Yes, hello there, and thanks very much. my question really is directed to Vince Cable, because I think he was instrumental in the originally setting up the sort of the British Business Bank, and that's obviously been a very sort of a major supporter, both directly and indirectly, to a number of different types of businesses. But I'm interested just to know, particularly with the announcement about the UK Infrastructure Bank, is the British Business Bank doing what he anticipated it should be, and how do we direct it to support UK manufacturing, which then ties in really with Jürgen's point in terms of just availability of funding and how that funding is directed and where to.
I think they're quite different institutions. I mean, the British Business Bank, and indeed, I did prompt it, and there's a bit of a story behind it. I mean, I managed to get £1 billion out of Osborne by supporting some completely crackpot scheme about new types of worker protection, which I think only 1 or 2 companies in the country have taken up. But anyway, we got our £1 billion, we got it started. And the original idea, of course, was to fill in the gaps, which the banks had left, because, as remember 7 or 8 years ago, the banks were not lending. They were just shoring up their balance sheets. We had a chronic credit shortage. And what we wanted the business bank to do was to get new types of credit flowing. So they revived invoice discounting and sort of old-fashioned kinds of funding instead of bank lending in the way that you normally experienced it. And they also were the people who started fintech lending, the funding circle and companies of that kind. So, but that was what the business bank was about. And more recently, they've taken on all these government guarantee programs through the pandemic. The infrastructure bank is a completely different concept. And as I understand it, it's basically replacing the Green Investment Bank, which I also set up. I mean, it was going very well. They'd got up to, we gave them a couple of billion to start with to capitalize them. But by the end, they'd match funded and got up to about 12 billion in total investment in green activities. And then the government, when we had a change, the coalition ended, they decided they wanted to sell it off, and they sold it to Macquarie, the Australian company, at a discount. It's still there in Edinburgh, but it's basically a small, unimportant subdivision of the Macquarie empire, and most of its works overseas. So having stupidly sold it, they're now trying to start it again. They now call it the Infrastructure Bank. And it goes a bit further than the remit of the Green Investment Bank, but it's essentially the same concept. And the aim will be to make kind of long-term investments in anything green related, whether it's offshore wind or recycling, energy conservation, things of this kind, in projects that theoretically would not quite have got off the ground purely under market conditions. I mean, that was they were given what was called a double bottom line. They had to be commercially sound, but at the same time satisfy an environmental requirement. And I think the Infrastructure Bank will probably range a bit wider than that, but the concept is the same. But it's got nothing to do with the British Business Bank. That was for plugging the gaps that had been left by the retreating banks.
You've got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, sorry, I thought you meant me.
No, well, I'd just be interested because as an entity, the British Business Bank, obviously works with fund managers to deploy capital into different interesting businesses, and I would have thought that the British Business Bank, again, with the right political support and perhaps even the HM Treasury leaning on it, could perhaps help some of Jürgen's headaches and challenges with regards to actually getting more capital deployed in conjunction with private investment, into the manufacturers' hands that are looking for it. Because I still think there is a lack of long-term patient capital available for manufacturers to invest through the cycle. and that still remains a challenge, I think, for the manufacturing sector.
Yes, there is another institution which doesn't get very much publicity, but I don't know any of you use it, which is called the Business Growth Fund. And that's something, basically, the banks agreed to put money into it to stop being beaten up by people like me. And we just left them to it. And that's exactly what they do. It's long-term patient capital for kind of medium-sized, what are called gazelle companies, rapid growth companies. And they've got a very, very good portfolio. They've now been going almost 10 years, and a very poor default rate. And a lot of innovative companies are making use of them. So, you know, if you're not familiar with them, just look them up on the website.
Yeah, can I just quickly come back? Nick,
please.
quickly come back on a couple of points there. So, I mean, just responding to Ram's earlier point, I do remember our discussion and we did listen, and Date Design Smarter is beginning to be a name. And like I say, there is a lobby for it. And we didn't get any money in the last comprehensive spending review, but, you know, we keep pushing. So please join that push, because I think it would be really great. On your point about, you know, not everything is super sexy and has to be sort of the latest and the top tech, you know, I think this goes back to Vince's point a little bit. I just think sometimes we just have to be a bit more marketing oriented. You know, I get lots of companies coming to me and saying, look, actually what I'm doing here is still Industry 3.0 and it's not yet Industry 4.0. I say, look, just call it Industry 4.0. Who cares? You know, we just want to be innovators. We want to be high tech. We want to be high productivity. We want to be designing smart. We want to be green. And ultimately, we want to create prosperity and create jobs. That's the reputation we want. And that's the sort of language that I think we have to use. And, you know, and we don't have to tell ministers and policymakers that it's still only Industry 3.0 and it's slightly lower tech. We keep that to ourselves. You know, and then just on that point of Ewan, you know, I do think there is a way in which you can get the business bank and more flow of capital into, you know, into our sector and activities, and that is to have a strategy. And you know, and that's why we created the industrial strategy. And I think the more you create that and you say, look, these are the areas we're going to focus on, and here's going to be some high tech, some high growth, you know, whether that's offshore wind, electric cars, hydrogen cars, whatever else. And of course, in the end, it's all of the supply chains that sit around that. The business bank does tend to follow those sorts of strategies. The problem we have is since Vince left, the industrial strategy has been meandering, and you've probably all seen that it's in the Financial Times and in Sky News today that the word industrial strategy is now being abandoned by government as of literally today. Which, you know, and it will be replaced with growth plan and innovation strategy and you name it. But this is this constant meandering and changing of direction. And again, you know, we just have to keep going back to government and saying, look, we want this sort of an innovation and industrial strategy because it creates focus for our businesses.
Yeah, Phil Kernock, then Mark. Thank you. Phil, go ahead.
Hi, Vince. Jürgen, thanks for your coming on today. Vince, you are sorely missed in the manufacturing industry. I used to work for ADS, the Trade Association Aerospace, and the work that was done in aerospace on technology is excellent and continues to develop, which is great. I ran the National Supply Chain Program for the aerospace industry across all regions, and it's a hell of a job. So Jürgen, I'm not surprised you're finding it challenging. The stakeholder groups are huge. We did a stakeholder map the other day, and to embrace everybody, including all the LEPs, all the trade associations, all the engagement is a huge exercise. And it took me 10 years to get to 800 companies on the program. So good luck. But I think there's a couple of things. One, maybe, Vince, I would also say that Lord Drayson is another great person that we had that represented manufacturing in my early days. and championed our industry as well as yourself. So we want more people like that. I think we do need to have more people like that and leaders of industry. Secondly, on the Made Smarter thing, maybe more engagement with sector specific, Jürgen, with the aerospace. I know the Aerospace Growth Partnership are asking the question at the moment, you know, to BASE, how do we help that process? And all the regional trade associations. I work a bit now for West of England Aerospace regional trade body with 300 members. So engaging with those to get that message out. And obviously the funding problem is still, it's a north-south divide now at the moment. So you've got that challenge as well. But I think connectivity, more connectivity with the different stakeholders may well help things going forward.
Mark Amphlett.
Yeah, I just wanted to touch back on the point that's been raised a few times now. It's about the making manufacturing sexy. I used to run a manufacturing company down here in South Devon. When I left, I obviously started up a marketing business to look after manufacturing businesses as well. Now, when I was making stuff, I would bore my wife to tears every time I was on the motorway and saw something came out of my factory. Now, surely that is sexy. We actually make stuff in this country. We've got a heritage of making good stuff. We do make good stuff. We really should be shouting about it and proud of what we do. So, I mean, my question to Vince and Jürgen really is, why on earth are people not shouting about what they make in their factories? Why are they just so entrenched in doing the day job that they can't be proud and stand up with their shoulders back and say, we made this in the UK and we're good at it?
There's a question for you.
Well,
Jürgen,
I can't speak.
Sorry, Vince, please go ahead.
Sorry, I can't speak for the manufacturers. I mean, they can only speak for themselves. But I mean, one of the problems in the political world, of course, is that the not invented here syndrome is absolutely acute. And things get reborn under a new label. And I thought it's worth asking, while Alison is still on the call, that one of the things which is coming through in the UK, they may have abolished industrial strategy for somebody's silly reason, but they are introducing in the UK this American defense research concept, which has been extremely important in, you know, American aerospace and, you know, the high-tech platforms. And I don't know whether Alison is familiar with it or whether her company makes use of it, but it's something the British government has seized on, and we're going to get a mini version of it in the UK, and it will be a source of support for, I think the intention is for, you know, highly innovative companies making things, but in a kind of revolutionary way. That's the concept that I've picked up.
Yeah, Alison, does DARPA cross your radar at all, Alison?
It has. It's crossed our radar a couple of times. We have not dove into it much ourselves, but I can very much see where it will help us make a bigger impact. I think to who brought the question up, I apologize, I missed the name, but I think you brought up a good point. I don't know that it's so much manufacturers embarrassed or not speaking up. I think it's, we are very good, manufacturers, we are very good at following directions. When you give us a statement of work and a blueprint, you tell us if you make 3 of these, we need 3 of these. We're good at that. We are not good at, here you go, this is what we need, explain to us the process. It's like, no, you asked me for the part. I'm going to make you the part. I'm not going to explain how I got there. And I think in our industry, the terms defense and the high technology, I think all those terms are helping the marketability of manufacturing and pushing workforce development in that regard. But it's also helping the manufacturers toot their own horn, so to speak, and do a better job at marketing themselves.
Good.
Thank you very much, Alison. I'm conscious of time. Julian, and then Steve. Mute, Julian.
There we go. I'm
There
sorry. Brexit hasn't been mentioned so far, and I know Jürgen, I'm not so sure, but I know Vince was very openly against the concept of it, and also at the same time, Vince, you're quite a China expert. So I suppose the general question is, given where we are, two alternatives: rejoin, if ever that was possible. And the other one is where should we be devoting our effort in exports and growth markets?
Well, I no longer go on about Brexit because the battle has been had. As far as I was concerned, it was lost, and you move on. I mean, some people are still campaigning on the subject, but in a way, there comes a time when you have to accept the situation as it is and try and make the best of it, which is where I think we are at the moment. I don't think rejoining is something that's going to happen for quite a long time. I think that if Sir Keir Starmer is sort of sensible and pragmatic, and the other opposition parties, I think probably what they should be aiming for is to, get Britain back into a customs union arrangement, to have the kind of close alignment with the single market, which is particularly important for, things like the chemical industry. And trying to bring that back through something like a sort of Norwegian type agreement. But even that's going to be very difficult to achieve. But I think certainly rejoining is not, I don't think it's very helpful to reopen all that. But in terms of where we go instead, I mean, we were pursuing the China market and the India market and the Russia market and the Brazil market when we're in the European Union. There was nothing to stop us doing it. And there are very few markets where we're going to get better access conditions than we already had. I mean, it's possible something could come of this attempt to talk to the Americans and a few sectors. I think maybe something positive come out of that. But as you rightly pointed out, China is the really tricky one, because China is now, it has an economy on some measures bigger than the United States. Certainly, it's approaching it in conventional GNP terms. Despite all of the the negativity about China, a lot of companies do very well there. And our friends, the Germans, have never been the least bit inhibited about dealing with China. They sell 4 or 5 times as much as we do. Some of their biggest companies do extremely well there, and they've been very focused on it. And, if I were advising the British government, I would say, well, okay, we have these human rights issues and so on, but actually China, is the big new superpower. It's absolutely insane not to have a deep commercial relationship with them, and we should be looking for trade opportunities just as we are with the Americans. So I would, I would go for China, and I would encourage their investments here, obviously in very high secure areas. You have to be careful, but I'm very much for a close relationship with China. I mean, the other alternative, of course, is India, but that's been there all the time, and I think most British businesses find it very hard work, but swing through treacle. I mean, the Indians are becoming more liberal economically, and will become a major market in 10, 20, 30 years. But China's there now. It's opening up despite the rhetoric, and I would be inclined to push for it.
Yeah, just very quickly. So, Julian, I was very much vocal about my not being supportive of Brexit for all of the reasons that we're now seeing, which is the friction to trade, both in non-tariff barriers, and I was one of the people who was talking about rules of origin a very long time ago, when hardly a politician or policymaker had a clue what it was. And indeed that was now putting very punitive tariffs on manufacturers. However, I agree with Vince. I think a rejoin campaign right now would be counterproductive. I also agree that our sort of you know, our vision at the moment should probably be on some sort of a customs union and much closer on single market arrangement. But I think there is a step before that. And it's a very, very important step. And that is we just need to start mending the relationship. You know, at the moment, it is just far too adversarial. And when it is, you know, and obviously, you know, when you have a divorce deal, things are a bit adversarial. But then hopefully, if you're lucky, you know, you can sort of get back to some sort of a relationship. I mean, what's unusual in this one is that you put the divorce lawyer still in charge of trying to mend our side of the relationship. That doesn't seem very clever to me. And we need to find a way of starting to have reasonable conversations, because if we don't, trade barriers are going to actually start going to go up. We could even end up in trade wars. And that would be absolutely crazy with our nearest, closest trading partner. So we have to immediately, I think, settle the mood and start to maturely have conversations about how can we improve some of the arrangements in the agreement, you know, such as for food and beverage, it's an absolute nightmare. And we need to probably have an agreement, something around, you know, those food beverage industry will know about veterinary agreements that you can strike. So there's going to have to be some intermediary steps to improve some of the current friction, and then you start building back slowly in terms of trade. In terms of global trade, just very quickly, I know we're short of time, Nick. I mean, you know, obviously we have to look towards China, towards trade, but actually what I think we need is, again, we need more of an industrial policy and strategy to work out what is it that we're going to trade. You know, Germany was very clear in its industrial policy. It's going to be cars, and it's going to be automation and machinery that's for the manufacturing of automotive and the manufacturing of other equipment. And that's what they went to export to China and have been hugely successful with it. We need that same sort of a strategy, and at the same time have a trade policy that has some key other strategies attached to it, which is that we will, with that trade strategy, look to drive better human rights. We will to make sure that improved trade drives down carbon emissions, and you know, so you need to have a strategy around this, and that's what I'd like to see more of.
The image of Lord Frost as marriage guidance counsellor is one that's going to haunt me, I'm afraid. Just to wrap up, Adam Payne put something in the chat box earlier when we were talking about how do we get a greater representative voice to reflect all of the great things we've been discussing and all this fabulous energy, which if I could just bottle you all, you know, I could sell it for $1 million, because, you know, just capturing all of this would be so great. But Adam, you identified a problem with the number of groupings we have in our sector which dilute our voice.
Yeah, they have their own vested interests, unfortunately. But yeah, we've got an institute, an organisation, we've got membership organisations. So you've got Make UK, Made in the Midlands. You've got Institute, you know, Confederation of Metal Bashers, and you know, all manner of stuff. Yet we don't come together and voice as one team at all. We all have our own vested, and it's so splintered, it's diluted. Now, if they were to come together, and we've discussed this before, if they to come together, that is a massive, massive voice. And I just think we'd have so much more power around it. You know, I was listening to Jürgen around, you know, the 520 million into services. Yet we are, you know, for what we have to do, there is a consultation, there is a design, there is the stuff that we have to go into to research and understand what's happening. We call it Industry 4.0, but it's a leading a path, you know, 1.52, 2.53, just call it whatever we want to call it, as Jürgen says. But we should be able to articulate that. Now we know enough, articulate that to say, plow that in, you get that out. There you go. What do you want us to do? And so for me, it needs so much alignment from all of them. Industrial strategy, absolutely. You know, what are we doing? Who's doing what? How are we tracking it? What are the actions? Who's responsible? You know, It's the stuff that we know from manufacturing. It just needs to be ploughed probably into politics. So, that's just my view. I think there is, there are so many of them. We come together. If somebody is to organise it to come together, I think it would be such a voice, a massive voice, in my opinion.
Yeah, there is, but the turf war. It's a lot of it is about these groups are actually businesses as well as advocacy groups, and but never mind. We will continue to find ways through this thicket. I'd like to thank Jürgen Meyer and Sir Vince Cable. Thank you so much for giving up your Thursday evening for us. It has been absolutely enthralling and riveting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Pleasure. Thank you very much.
And thank you all. Yeah. Who mentioned
For those interested, if anybody is on Clubhouse, I am led to believe there is a manufacturing room being kicked off at 8 o'clock this evening, talking about makers. So if anybody is on Clubhouse, Tristan Bailey, who's on here, was on here last week. He's in it, and he's invited me in over. But if anybody's on Clubhouse, it's cracking off at 8 o'clock.
Well, that sounds great. Don't forget the Made Smarter conference is next Wednesday. I'll be hosting a panel with Jürgen, Stephen Phipps, and Make UK, and other worthies in the Made Smarter environment. So thank you all. I know many of you didn't have a chance to chat today, but of course it would have been like chucking out time on Bognor High Street on a Saturday night if we'd all had a crack at it. So next time, but again, thanks to Vince, thanks to Jürgen. As always on a Thursday evening, I have a prime bottle of Malbec waiting for me downstairs, so I'm heading that way, and I shall see you all next week, and blessings to you all. Take care, and see you again soon.